There is a province in this country where a one-bedroom apartment in the city costs more than a house in most of Europe. Where the average home price in Vancouver has crossed $1.3 million and kept climbing without apology. Where young people do the math, realize the math does not work, and leave. But 500 kilometers from that city, in the mountains and valleys of the British Columbia interior, there are ghost towns so completely forgotten by the modern economy that entire properties, houses, land, buildings, sell for less than a single month's rent in downtown Vancouver. I am not rounding. I am not being dramatic. The numbers are real and they will make you question everything you thought you knew about the price of space in this country. British Columbia has more ghost towns than any other Canadian province. Over 150 documented abandoned communities, most of them the wreckage of mining booms that rose fast and fell faster. Come on, subscribe, and let's start. Number 8. Sandon, Kootenay region. In the Selkirk Mountains of southeastern BC, in a narrow valley that the Carpenter Creek carved over 10,000 years, there is a place called Sandon. In 1896, silver was discovered nearby and Sandon became one of the most important cities in British Columbia almost overnight. At its peak it had 5,000 residents, 24 hotels, 23 saloons, its own electric streetcar system, and a red light district that the provincial government officially pretended did not exist. It was the most electrified city in BC at a time when most of the province was still using candles. 2 fires and a flood later, Sandon was gone. The last fire in 1900 destroyed what the first had missed. The flood of 1955 took the rest. Today, one original building remains, the City Hall, still standing in the Creek Valley like a man who refused to leave a party that ended 50 years ago. Land in the surrounding Slocan Valley sells for $1,500 to $3,000 per acre. Small acreages of 5 to 20 acres list for $15,000 to $50,000. The valley itself is genuinely beautiful, mountain views, clear rivers, 4 seasons with actual snow. The catch is the nearest hospital is in Anyox, 60 kilometers away, and the roads in winter require a truck and confidence in equal measure. Number 7 takes us to a town that the company did not just abandon. It erased. Number 7. Anyox, Northwest BC. On the Portland Canal in the far northwest of British Columbia, accessible only by boat or floatplane, there is a place called Anyox. Between 1914 and 1935, it was a copper smelting town with 2,500 residents, a hospital, a school, a theater, a golf course, and a grocery store that stocked items you could not find anywhere else within 200 kilometers. Granby Mining built it, owned it entirely, and when the copper ran out in 1935, dismantled it with the efficiency of a company that knew exactly what it had built and exactly how to unbuild it. The smelter fumes had killed every tree within several kilometers of the town. When the residents left, they left behind a landscape of dead timber and toxic soil that nature has spent 90 years trying to forgive. Today, ruins are accessible only by water. There is no road. There is no land for sale because there is no practical way to reach it without a boat. Anyox makes this list not because you can buy it, but because it is the purest example of what happens when a company town finishes its purpose. The company leaves. The town ceases to exist. And the land remembers what was done to it long after everyone involved is gone. Number 6. Bralorne, Bridge River Valley. About 170 kilometers north of Whistler, up a road that turns to gravel and keeps going long after you expected it to stop, there is a small community called Bralorne. At its peak in the 1930s and 40s, the Bralorne Pioneer Mine was the richest gold mine in British Columbia. The town had 2,000 residents, a hospital, curling rinks, and the kind of civic infrastructure that a profitable mine could afford to build and a declining mine could not afford to maintain. The mine closed in 1971. The population collapsed to under 50. Today Bralorne has around 40 permanent residents and the eerie quality of a place that is not quite dead but is not exactly alive either. This is where the real estate story gets interesting. Houses in Bralorne sell for $80,000 to $180,000. In a province where the average home costs over $900,000, that is not a typo. Acreages surrounding the town list for $1,000 to $2,500 per acre. The catch is the 170-kilometer drive from Whistler on a road that becomes genuinely dangerous in winter, and the nearest hospital is in Pemberton, 130 kilometers away. But if your definition of affordable includes mountain views and silence and a house that costs less than a parking stall in Vancouver, Bralorne is asking you to reconsider your definition. Subscribe and stay with me, because number 4 has houses selling for less than $50,000, and number 1 is a ghost town with a story so strange it was investigated by the Canadian government. Number 5. Phoenix, Boundary Country. Near the town of Greenwood in the southern interior of BC, at an elevation of 1,400 meters where the winters are serious and the summers are short, there was once a city called Phoenix. At its peak in the early 1900s, Phoenix had 4,000 residents and was the highest incorporated city in Canada. It had an opera house, 3 newspapers, and a hockey team that won the BC Championship in 1910.
The copper ran out. The mine closed.
By 1920, Phoenix was empty. What makes Phoenix unusual is what happened to the buildings. When the mine closed, the company sold them for parts. Houses were moved on flatbed trucks to Greenwood and other nearby towns. The opera house was dismantled. The hotels were stripped. When the open-pit mining operation expanded in the 1970s, it swallowed what little remained of the original town site. Phoenix does not exist anymore even as ruins.
The pit ate it.
Land in the boundary country surrounding the old Phoenix site sells for $500 to $1,200 per acre. Small acreages of 10 to 20 acres list for $8,000 to $20,000. Greenwood, the nearest town, has the distinction of being the smallest city in Canada by population, around 700 people, which gives you a sense of how rural this corner of BC truly is.
Number 4.
Retallack, Slocan Valley. Back in the Kootenays, 40 kilometers north of Kitsault on Highway 31, there is a property called Retallack that has changed hands several times in the past 2 decades, and each time the sale made news because nobody could quite believe the price. Retallack was a silver mining community in the early 1900s.
The mine closed. The town emptied.
For decades it sat abandoned in the mountains. Then, in the 1990s, someone bought the entire site and turned it into a heli-skiing lodge. The lodge operated for years, burned down, was rebuilt, struggled financially, and eventually went back on the market. The entire Retallack property, buildings, land, mountain tenure, has listed for under $2 million. For an entire mountain resort operation.
In British Columbia.
That number sounds large until you remember that a detached house in Vancouver costs more. For buyers without resort ambitions, the surrounding Slocan Valley offers acreages at $1,200 to $2,500 per acre. Parcels of 10 to 40 acres list for $15,000 to $60,000. The valley has a small but real community of permanent residents, functioning internet, and a quality of light in the mountains that photographers drive from Vancouver specifically to capture.
Number 3. Kitsault, Alice Arm.
In 1980, a molybdenum mining company built an entire town on the Alice Arm Inlet in northwestern BC. 1,200 residents. 96 townhouses. A recreation center, a shopping mall, a pub, a medical clinic. Built from scratch in 2 years. Modern, functional, and completely isolated, accessible only by boat or floatplane. The mine closed 18 months after it opened. The town was evacuated. Every resident left within weeks. For 2 decades, Kitsault sat completely empty and perfectly preserved. The furniture still in the houses, the food still in the store, the equipment still in the recreation center. A ghost town frozen not in the 1890s but in 1983. In 2004, a California businessman bought the entire town for $5 million. He had plans to turn it into an international conference center. Those plans have not fully materialized.
The town still stands.
Still largely empty. Still one of the strangest places in Canada. You cannot easily buy property in Kitsault itself, but the surrounding observatory inlet area offers remote acreages at prices that reflect the isolation. $200 to $600 per acre for land with no road access, rising to $800 to $1,500 per acre for properties reachable by logging road. This is frontier pricing for frontier living.
Number 2. Granite City, Similkameen.
In 1885, gold was discovered on Granite Creek in the Similkameen Valley of southern BC. Within a year, Granite City had 2,000 residents and was the 3rd largest city in British Columbia. It had hotels, saloons, a post office, and the particular energy of a place that believes it is becoming permanent. It was not becoming permanent. The gold ran out in 2 years. By 1890, Granite City was a ghost town. By 1900, the forest had begun reclaiming it. Today, the site is a heritage property managed by the province. A few foundation outlines remain in the trees. The creek still runs clear and cold over the gravel where men once panned for fortunes. The surrounding Similkameen Valley is one of the most undervalued real estate markets in BC. Agricultural land sells for $3,000 to $6,000 per acre. Rural residential acreages of 5 to 20 acres list for $80,000 to $200,000. The valley has a genuine wine industry, 4 seasons, and the kind of landscape that lifestyle magazines photograph and price out of reach everywhere except here. Number 1 is different from everything else on this list. It was not abandoned by a mining company. It was abandoned by an entire government. And what happened there was investigated by the Canadian Parliament.
Number 1. Swiftwater, Fraser Canyon.
In the Fraser Canyon north of Hope, accessible by a forestry road that most vehicles should not attempt, there is a collection of abandoned structures that once constituted a community called Swiftwater. The story here is less about the place and more about what the BC government did to the people who live there. Through the 1950s and 60s, the province systematically pressured remote Fraser Canyon communities to relocate, cutting road access, withdrawing services, refusing to maintain infrastructure, until residents had no practical choice but to leave. It was not an announced policy. It was applied through 1,000 small bureaucratic decisions until communities that had existed for generations ceased to be viable. A parliamentary inquiry in the 1970s examined what happened. The findings were not widely publicized. Land along the upper Fraser Canyon sells for $400 to $900 per acre with road access. Remote parcels list for under $200 per acre, among the cheapest in British Columbia. They are cheap because the government once decided, through deliberate inaction, that people should not live there.
The land is still there.
The price reflects a history that the listings never mention. And that is the truth about British Columbia ghost towns and their impossibly low home prices. The numbers are real. The mountains are genuinely that beautiful. But so is the isolation, and the distance from hospitals, and the winters that close roads, and the history that made some of these places cheap in ways that have nothing to do with market forces. You can buy a house in Bralorne for less than a used car in Vancouver. You can own mountain acreage in the Kootenays for the price of a semester of tuition. You can stand on your land and see nothing except peaks and sky, and tell yourself this is what people in the city are paying $1 million to be near.
And you would not be wrong.
You would just be very far from a hospital.
Bring cash. Bring a 4-wheel drive.
Bring a very honest conversation with yourself about what you need to be happy. I am a grandfather and grandfathers worry. Look after yourself.